Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I support development of American-made alternatives to the RD-180 rocket engine, according to Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, Frank Kendall, ending the use of the RD-180 prior to the availability of a comparable domestic rocket engine will cost taxpayers over $1 billion. What effect will restrictions on the purchase of RD-180 engines have on NASA and Boeing's CST-100 Starliner commercial crew space system? And my question is directed to Mr. Elbon.
Thank you. Let's see, I guess we're concerned about that, even though the legislation that's being discussed doesn't necessarily target civil space uses. Reduction in flight rate for the Atlas V, which CST-100 flies on, and other users, by the way, fly on as well to space station. A reduction in flight rate could increase the cost of that and eventually be an impact. So we're hopeful that that doesn't happen, that it's able to keep flying, and then the flight rate as planned will allow us to continue to use that for the Starliner as planned.
Thank you, Mr. Elbon. My next question will be for Mr. Weir, and I want you to be thinking of why the American people want to go to Mars. And as a backdrop, I'm going to mention America's financial condition, because that's going to be what we have to weigh, the pros and cons. I'm not sure if you're familiar with America's financial condition, but in summary, we're headed to an insolvency and bankruptcy probably within the next 20 years, maybe in the next 10 years as a country. I say that looking at a $19 trillion debt accumulation predominantly over the last decade and a half, and reports by the Comptroller General, Gene Dodaro, and the Congressional Budget Office warning us that our current financial path is unsustainable, which is accounting language for if you keep doing this, there's going to be a total collapse of the system. Additionally, the CBO has warned us that while we had a series of trillion-dollar deficits under Democratic rule of the House and Senate in 2007 and 2008, coupled with Barack Obama in 2009 and 2010, since the 2010 elections, we've slowly but surely gotten our deficits down to $439 billion, which is where we were last year. This year's deficit, however, is taking a dramatic turn for the worse. Now it's projected to be in the neighborhood of $534 billion within 6 years, $1 trillion a year, and nonstop trillion-dollar-a-year deficits until we go insolvent. So with that kind of financial backdrop, what can you say to help persuade the American people that Mars is a goal that we should undertake despite the financial risks that our country faces?
It's funny you should mention the potential insolvency, because in the 1930s, the United States was not in a great state solvency-wise either. And during that time, the government invested very heavily in building up the commercial airline space, which cost a lot of money. It required the government to basically take a bunch of land from various cities under eminent domain laws that was worth a lot. It spent enormous amounts of money in the form of tax breaks and policy decisions in order to build the burgeoning airline industry. Since then, it has definitely paid itself off, far more than we ever spent on it in the form of tax revenue from that industry. So I would say that my answer to your question is that putting money into a mission to Mars or anything related to space, as long as a lot of that money ends up going toward commercial development, will help bring the commercial space industry into a profitable situation. Once the price to low Earth orbit gets down to the point where a middle-class American can afford to go into space, it will start becoming, there will be a boom. There will be an economic boom in the space industry, and the United States government will receive the benefits of that boom in the form of taxes and revenues.
Anybody else want to add to the comments of Mr. Weir? Hearing nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Now I